Hello, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start us up, try and keep on a good, efficient timeline for this event, which is kind of like herding cats in a classic sense. But my name is Chris Hale. I'm tapped to moderate MC this event, the first Kinney County Groundwater Summit, which is designed to focus on three crucial aspects of groundwater: legality, hydrology, and groundwater management. And the Los Moras Springs Conservation Association, who's put this event together, and the ones that asked me to moderate and MC, they've done a fine job of getting three very impressive statewide experts on those three topics. And so before we fire up with the speechifying, I'm going to be a little bit unconventional here and play a little bit of a song for you. And I'd ask you to listen closely to the lyrics of this song. Before I do that, can you all hear me all right? Microphone working okay? This is a John Lennon, Paul McCartney written song performed by somebody else, but their song.
There are places I remember all my life. Though some have changed, some forever, not for better. And some have gone, and some remain. All these places had their moments.
Bear with me while I try and silence Bette Midler. She does not want to be silenced. There we go. So some listening to the song recently after I was asked to do this moderating, I felt like that song, the lyrics could have been written for us in our county, this environment. I've been a Fort Clark member since 1979, but my connection to this place goes back to 65 years ago as a kid. And it's a very special place to me, certainly. But I'm not special. Everybody here has special connection to this place, other springs and streams in our county, our region. It's a spectacular place, whether we're talking Pinto Spring, Elm Creek, Mud Creek. There's some folks here from Del Rio, San Felipe, just as special to them. As we all know, there have been changes to this place. Last 5 years, consistently, the spring has gone dry. The first time in history to have that back-to-back episodes of spring going completely dry. So hopefully this place and these other places in our region will remain and not be gone forever, ever in the future. But groundwater is, of course, the topic at hand. So before we dive into the meat of things and you hear the speakers, I want to give acknowledgement to some important people that have put this event together. Los Moras Springs Conservation Association, it's their event, their idea. Also, I'd like to ask John Wiley to come up, and in turn, any of the other Fort Clark Springs board members that would like to say a few words come up. I singled John out to have him come first because John and Brittany collectively have 125 years roundabout connection to this place, whether Fort, Brackett, Kinney. So thus I single John out to come up first, and then the other Fort Clark Springs board members that are here, if they care to, can say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Chris said, my name is John Wiley, and as some of you may know, I grew up in Brackettville, and even though my wife and I don't live here currently, we both still consider Kinney County home. Looking out over the audience, I'm so thankful, very thankful for everyone gathered here today. Long before Highway 90, before Brackettville, before Fort Clark Springs, many, if not all, local peoples and wildlife congregated here because of this spring. With the surrounding arid landscape, this life-giving spring besides us became gathering place for a catalyst for this community. Fast forward to the present. Thanks to the advances in infrastructure, our water sourced from under the ground and travels through modern pipes to our faucets. So as humans, we no longer need to gather here for survival, making it all too easy to forget that we need water and each other to survive. Yet then, and even today, this spring represents not just water, but life and community. This spring has been and will always play a major role in the success of this community. Without it, we have less jobs, less biodiversity, less tourism, and less connection with each other. Much like the connections going back thousands of years to this very place. Our community is not divided by a road made of asphalt and a fence. It is connected by this very special place. Galatians 6:2 tells us, carry one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. In Matthew chapter 22, Jesus tells us that the greatest commandment is to love God, and the second greatest commandment is to love our neighbors as ourselves. But he notes that the second is equally as important as the first. What a strong case for community. Our community. Our neighbors are just as important as the water flowing out of this spring. Thank you, everyone, who organized this event and created a space for community to come and dance and learn, eat, and educate ourselves on this spring and be merry together. And likewise, thank you to everyone in attendance today for choosing community. And I hope that at the end of these festivities that we give a special thanks to the very special people that came here and are giving their time and their expertise to help us out and educate all of us sitting here today. And just want to thank y'all so much for being here.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Fort Clark Springs, also known as the land of milk and honey. I'm very encouraged by the energy that's here. I'm assuming we're all gonna work hard to protect the water in our area. And the people painting that over there on that wall over there, if you all turn around and look over there, it says, "Water is life." And that's the bottom line. Thank you.
How y'all doing? Jason Long. Some of y'all might know me. But I also want to comment on that. Water is life. It's also the new oil. How many of you heard that? I'd like to thank the Conleys and Los Moras Springs Conservation Association for bringing this panels of experts here to try to educate us. They've devoted their lives to accumulate as much knowledge on this topic as they can. You know, I haven't been here that many years, since 2007, but it was a different place in 2007. We've lost a lot of our riparian forest. Trees are falling. They're not going to grow back in my lifetime. They probably won't grow back in our children's lifetime. Animals, the amount of wildlife that we see in here, I used to see tons of porcupines, beavers, fox, bobcats, all manner of things. I ride on the creek every day with my dogs. I rarely see animals now. Rabbits? No, barely. And that's because of this continuous drought. You know, cities are thirsty. Industry is thirsty. And this is a problem all around the entire state. And I hope you guys pay attention to these experts and see what they have to say. Thank you.
Well, as the saying goes, they save the best for last, huh? I want to thank everybody for being here, and it's been an honor to be on this Fort Clark board. Uh, we are very active in trying to do something to save these springs. Um, Eddie Morales has been a great support to sending some letters and doing some stuff with some of the deals. I think they're going to be working on some new legislation when they come back. But thank everybody for being here. It is life. It is the life not only of the fort, but it is the life of Brackaville.
Thank you again, Fort Clark Springs, for letting the event be here. I'm going to jump back a little bit in time. I said I singled out John Wiley to come up because of the 125-year connection, but there are others. Richard Gonzalez and other members of the Lapon Apache Band of Texas who are here for the event. They go back hundreds of years at this place, at least. And one of the Lapon Apache Band members, Andrew Austin, after the panel discussion, is going to perform some Lapon Apache music for y'all. The other person I want to give thanks to, I just met today, Adrian Falcone. He was born in Del Rio and lives there, promotes and supports the arts as owner of the Falcone Art Gallery of Texas in Del Rio, founder of Centro de Arte Falcone, Mexico, and established in 2019 a nonprofit foundation to bring art closer to people as a tool for learning, identity, and social transformation. He's exhibited his art all over the world, literally, throughout the United States, Mexico, Venice, France, Spain, and all around. So Italy, Venice. So it's a treat to get to see some of this beautiful work that he's brought and some of the bracket, the photography club and bracket art students too. So let's talk about what we're here for. I'm going to introduce in sequence each of the three experts, and I'm going to kick off with each one of them a specific, detailed kind of question. They don't have to answer it. I don't want them to answer it right off the bat, but I want them to, during the course of their presentation, speak to it. These kickoff questions or lead-off questions, I'll call them, these are my questions. These are things that occur to me as being critically important topics for all of us related to our groundwater, our springs, our streams. So I'm going to do that, and they will give their presentations, and then I encourage all of you to ask questions and don't hold back. This is complex stuff. You may be inclined to think, well, I don't understand the topic well enough to ask a question. Trust me, if it's a question that enters your mind, there are other people here that have that same question, and even people that have dabbled in water topics, whether water law, water policy, water whatever. It's complex stuff. So don't hold back and ask your questions. This is a very rare opportunity to put questions to, as I say, three of the leading statewide experts on these three specific arenas within water. So with that, let's jump into it. Bill Bunch, the leadoff expert, is his area's law. Bill Bunch is approaching 40 years practicing law. He practices in Austin. Heavy emphasis on environmental law and water law for a very long time. He's widely acclaimed, hailed as having been vital in the protection, saving of iconic springs, San Marcos Spring, Barton Springs. He founded in 2009 the Save Our Springs Coalition. He's then and now still executive director of Save Our Springs Coalition, SOS. And with no further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone off to Bill Bunch. But actually, as I said, I need to give a kickoff question for him. Just a moment. I'll read these because these, as I said, these are very specific. My kickoff questions are very specific and have some detail to them. Part of the state's water planning process included setting what are called desired future conditions for aquifers, DFCs. They're commonly acronym reference. One of our Kinney County DFCs concerns Las Moras spring flow. That DFC has been out of compliance on occasion of late recent years. In fact, Dr. Hutchison stated at the Sonora statewide planning group in Sonora recently, GMA 7, just last month, that the Las Moras DFC can't be met if drought time pumping exceeds about 10,000 acre feet. The recent actual pumping is somewhere north of 10,000 acre feet, and there are permitted quantities of pumping, acre feet of pumping somewhere in the, I believe, 65,000 acre feet range. So based on any kind of assimilation of those numbers, that hydrology compliance with the Las Moras DFC is going to be extremely challenging, if not impossible, according to the Dr. Hutchison analysis. Dr. Hutchison, until recently, was the expert hydrologist that worked for the Kinney County Groundwater Conservation District. So my question to you, Bill, is explain DFCs, their role in protecting spring flows. What are consequences if DFCs are not complied with? Is it appropriate or legal in the event of inability to comply with a DFC? Is it appropriate to simply change the DFC? You might say move the goalposts. So that's the specific question. Again, don't jump right into that. Just work it in somewhere during your talk.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks everybody for coming out. Thanks for having me here today. As Chris said, I'm Bill Bunch with Save Our Springs Alliance. We've been working for over 30 years to protect the springs, in particular of the Edwards Aquifer ecosystem. And I brought a map here and just to reference, and you might take a gander at it during our break or after, showing what we call the hidden heart of Texas, which is this Edwards Aquifer limestone system that links Las Moras Springs all the way up to Barton Springs in Austin, and then even farther up the Balcones Escarpment and I-35 to Salado Springs. All of the largest springs in Texas, with Las Moras being the 9th largest, emerge from this incredible karstic cave-forming limestone Edwards Aquifer system. And it's easy to forget that we literally would not be here today but for Las Moras Springs. Bracketville would not be here today. Our capital city, Austin, would not be there. I would not live there except for Barton Springs. And you can go down the list. San Marcos, Barton's is the 4th largest spring. San Marcos is the 2nd largest spring in Texas. Then in New Braunfels, Comal Springs. So New Braunfels exists because of Comal Springs. That's the largest in Texas. And then used to be among the largest, San Pedro and San Antonio Springs at San Antonio. But because it's those springs are higher elevation, they rarely flow anymore. And then heading back out this way, Uvalde is there because of Leona Springs, and then Bracketville is here. And they go lockstep. And I'll get to the legal question of desired protecting and achieving the desired future condition under our state water law. But the question really is bigger than that, and is what is the desired future for Bracketville? Because this community won't be here. The Fort Clark community, as part of Bracketville, will not be here if we continue to have year after year of the springs drying up. And there's cautionary tales across the globe. Perhaps most famously, Owens Valley, when Los Angeles basically stole their water, and they had a very thriving rural agriculture-based community in Owens Valley. And when the water was gone, the whole life there was gone. So, this is an existential thing. And the springs, created what we know as Texas and Central Texas. And so this, as you know, is rather serious stuff. So we need to keep these springs clean and flowing. And here the main issue is the flowing part, the water quantity side. That's the focus as opposed to the quality side. But there are quality issues at most of these springs, and we're seeing springs drying up. Not just here, Jacob's Well at Wimberley, you've probably heard about, is sort of iconic spring as well, that recently started drying up, like here, that had never happened before in recorded history. And so this is a challenge that it's not just here. You shouldn't feel alone in this battle. But the way forward is we simply have to match the withdrawals with the inflows. It's very simple. And the law provides for local groundwater districts to set these goals of what do we want to be our goal for managing our water. And the Kinney County Groundwater Conservation District has set one of their key goals, their desired future condition that drives their management decisions, is preserving the spring flows at an average of basically 24 cubic feet per second. Now, obviously, when the springs dry up, as they have been, that goal is not being achieved, and the community's suffering. And as we look to a future where the records tell us we're getting hotter and we're losing our soil moisture, our soils are drying up, it can get even harder to reach these goals. But it can be done. And it starts with the Groundwater Conservation District and the board managing to meet those goals. And that does mean restricting pumping, especially some of the larger pumping, and especially also keeping the water in Kinney County. The last time I was here was 15, 17 years ago, when the San Antonio water system was looking at possibly buying water from Kinney County, from some private water developers, to ship in and supplement the San Antonio's water supply. And we joined with the local community at that time to get the facts, get the science as we understood it at that time, and then educate the San Antonio City Council and the San Antonio Water System Board that they shouldn't be trying to export water from an even drier region into San Antonio, and that it wasn't reliable and there wasn't enough to meet the local community needs and still export a large amount to San Antonio. And so we're now sort of once again back in that place. I'd love to be a part of helping y'all achieve these goals and the legal goal of protecting and achieving the desired future condition. It requires a few things. Democracy doesn't just happen on its own. It requires participation. An activist once famously said, making love and making democracy are the same. You have to do it and not just watch it on TV. So participate, get educated. And because you're here, we know you're doing that. yes, vote, but attend these groundwater conservation board meetings, speak to them. They have to listen to you if you show up to talk about something that's on their agenda. Think about being a candidate in the future and demand. And this is our cultural thing. We have to have integrity to tackle these very tough problems. And that means we're respectful of each other and each other's opinions. But the old saying is we're each entitled to our own opinion, but we're not entitled to our own facts. And we need to get the best information, the best science on the table. And then we need transparency from our elected officials and from the staff of the groundwater district as well. And with transparency, integrity, and community participation, we can save the springs and the future of Brackettville. Thank you. Oh, questions now? Yeah. Okay. All right. I thought we were going to do all three of us and then take questions. No? Okay. Go ahead. We'll do a couple here.
I'll try to speak loud enough so everyone can hear me. I have personal experience with the Edwards Aquifer Authority. My ancestors settled in Medina County in 1846. And I believe that my name is Anna Rinkin. I have experience in Medina County with San Antonio taking most of the water there. My ancestors settled Medina County in 1846 when Texas was a republic. And the Edwards Aquifer / San Antonio reworked the water laws, and they defined the Edwards Aquifer as an underground river, a navigable stream. And now, which is, I think, good because it's helped. The irrigation farmers that show the historical use get 2 acre-feet a year. That's why you don't see irrigation pipe laid on the ground anymore. You see the sprinkler systems, which are more efficient. But this has affected me because we were ranchers and farmers, and my grandfather didn't irrigate. So we have been stripped of our water rights that were under our ranches. The impetus here, I think we need to know that what's being pumped out of here is way too much. And I would suggest that somehow in our Texas legislature, this needs to be redefined in our county here because too much water is being taken from here. I couldn't believe the number you quoted. And it's just astonishing that it's being sold from here. I hope I don't offend a lot of people, but we need to save this spring. And our speakers are correct about this. Thank you.
Thanks. I didn't detect a specific question for Mr. Bunch there, but was there anything specific?
My question is, why is it 2 acre-feet in the Edwards Aquifer in Medina County, and it's astronomical here?
So the question is why is when you have an agricultural pumping permit, you get 2 acre-feet of water per year per acre? And that's really a technical question that the next speaker, Dr. Robert Mace from the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State, he is our top water scientist in Texas. It's recognized across the state. So I'll let him take that question.
I apologize.
The third speaker, Mr. Mauk, is in the unenviable position. All hard questions are going to roll downhill to Mr. Mauk ultimately. Anybody else before I introduce Robert Mace?
Okay, so I'm not too familiar with the ranches and the well stuff, but there's always been a lot of talk about that. My other question is, I may have said it. This is very simple. San Antonio is really developing. and they're building all these subdivisions. I don't know if they're doing any thought to where they're going to get their water. They've been always trying to get our water from us. Do they have any recourse to really force us to do it?
So the question is, can San Antonio force this area to provide water to them?
Yes,
And the best answer is no,
that's fine.
under current law. And so, as these problems get more and more difficult, there is a lot of pressure on the state legislature to change the laws, but thankfully it's more towards protecting local communities to hold on to their water rather than export. But we need to see that trend continue rather than have the big cities and their populations be able to come and demand that local rural areas export their water to the cities.
But eventually, if they're building all these subdivisions, they have to get their water from someplace, otherwise the aquifer is going to go totally dry. Is that not right?
So yes, they're going to need to find some water. They can get more efficient. There's big proposals, and now there's state funding that voters approved in November. And again, Dr. Mace knows more about this. And looking at desalination
Yes.
of brackish groundwater, and then potentially even, piping desalinated water up from the Gulf to parts of South Texas and potentially as far as San Antonio.
I heard that they are thinking about doing that, coming from the Gulf and watering and putting it, piping up through there. That's just a long process.
That's not a near-term answer. They ended up, so when they were looking at Kinney County water 15 years ago, they ended up instead building a 130-mile pipeline called the Vista Ridge Project to the Carrizo Aquifer up actually north and east of Austin. And that will provide, that's providing a huge a boost to San Antonio's limited Edwards Aquifer supply. And that will be good for at least some number of decades before that aquifer might get pumped dry as well.
Thank you.
So
I'm gonna, one more question, and I'm gonna introduce Robert Mace. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I'm hoping that this is something that a legal expert like yourself could answer. First of all, I want to thank you for your efforts because we lived in Austin when the whole project started years ago, and it was felt overwhelming. And to see what's been accomplished just bit by bit, like you said, you got to get out and do it. So I thank you for being here. My name is Elizabeth Hodges, and we've lived on the fort here since 2004. But my question is, when I talk to people about water, I want to listen to everyone. I want to hear, I mean, somebody has to grow food. I understand that. It seems like to me, when I tell people we have 65,000 or more acre feet allocated, and the spring goes dry somewhere between 10 and 11,000 feet, is there some legal way that as a community we could get that lowered? Because it seems unreasonable to me for that.
So yes, there is a way to get that higher level of authorized pumping reduced. The groundwater district has that authority, and there's even an argument that they have that requirement because we have better science now that is consistent with your summary, that if the district's going to achieve its own adopted desired future condition of keeping the springs flowing at 24 cubic feet per second on average, that pumping has to be drastically lowered. Now, thankfully, that 65,000 acre feet has never really been pumped. Nobody's come close to pumping it. Where it's been more in that 11,000 range. And that's where the local folks and Dr. Mace have more of those exact details. But we need to.
Is it a legal action we have to go through with the groundwater district to question that allocation?
Well, there can be legal actions against the board. There can be legal actions against the board, but hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully that the board will consider the new science. We'll listen to the community. more people start showing up at their meetings and saying, you know, we got to do these things, and this is your own standard that you need to live up to.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm sorry, Sharon, go ahead.
I'd like to answer that on the MAG is what she's talking about. And we have submitted a letter to GMA 7 on our MAG, lowering it because it is at about 70,000, should be about 10. It is in the process. They have agreed to take a look at that. It's up to our water board here. That's why it is so important for y'all to get involved and go to these meetings, because they are tabling it and tabling it and tabling it. It was admitted by Dr. Bill that they have known our MAG was too high since 2013, and nothing's been done about it. But they have been given that letter at GMA 7. They pushed it back on our water board, and our water board tables it. So it's in the works. The legalities have started, but it's so important for y'all to be involved.
Sharon, thanks. And Elizabeth, thank you wherever you went. But both of you, thank you for that question. My specific question for Dr. Mace in just a minute was on that topic. So they spared you some of the detail in my kickoff question for Dr. Mace. So Robert, come on up. Let me introduce you. As he's coming up, we're shifting from the legalities of groundwater to hydrology topic. And I'll introduce Robert Mace in just a second. In the audience here somewhere, nobody has done more hydrology research in West Texas on springs and aquifers than Southwest Research Institute. And we have with us here Dr. Ron Green and also Mauricio Flores from Southwest Research Institute. Tremendous experience and expertise. So thank you both for taking the time to come out here today for this event. Robert Mace grew up in rural Illinois. A love of math and rocks took him to New Mexico. Got a degree, ultimately a master's in hydrology in New Mexico. Love of Wendy, his wife, and music prompted him to move to Austin. And he had a job with the Bureau of Economic Geology at UT. Following a PhD there, he developed the first groundwater availability model, GAM. And then he took a job with the Texas Water Development Board and was there for 18 years, rose to the level of Deputy Executive Administrator. 2017, he left the Water Development Board, joined the Meadows Center for Water and Environment and the Geography Department at Texas State University. So let me hand it off to you, Robert, with kickoff question, which is on that MAG topic. It was set something more than 70,000 acre feet, as Sharon and Elizabeth told you. At a recent GMA 7 meeting in Sonora, Dr. Hutchison said we're really looking at more like 7,000 for an overall average MAG. Big difference. Recent Kinney County Groundwater District data shows an apparent correlation and sharp decline in spring flow when pumping gets above 10,000. Explain the significance of a MAG and how MAGs should be, can be changed in accordance with, quote, best available science.
Very good. But before I start off, I want to thank Ziggy's for the excellent food and barbecue. I always say it's not a water meeting if there's not barbecue at it. So glad to see that y'all didn't disappoint. Before I answer the question, I just want to talk briefly about science of aquifers in general, and then get a little more specific to Kinney County. I don't have enough time to go into great gory detail, but just to give you all a little bit of a tutorial there. So aquifers, obviously, it's water that's underneath our feet, and they're reservoirs of water, and that water has to be coming from somewhere, so which we call the recharge. So the water's coming in, and then once it's in, it's moving, and it has to come out somewhere. And so in many ways, and Ron Green will correct me later, but many ways it's like a checking account, right? You have you have money coming into your checking account, and then you're paying bills with money coming out. And then maybe you've got a corpus of funds or some funds sitting in your account earning minimal interest from your bank. Groundwater systems generally work that same way, particularly the aquifer in Kinney County, because the water does flow through the aquifer very quickly. So you've got water coming in one part, and then you've got water coming out. I like to say in an aquifer, what goes down must come out. This is before there's any pumping. So in Kinney County, you get water coming in as recharge, and it's coming in the northern part of the county, as well as north of the county in some of those counties. And then the West Nueces River, it flows off of the plateau, and then it reaches a point where water is leaking into the aquifer there. Again, before pumping, that water flowed through the aquifer, and then it comes out at springs. So that's the bills you're paying out of your checking account. In this case, this is water that's coming out of the springs, and there's Mud Springs, there's Pinto Springs, obviously Las Moras Springs. There's some other smaller springs in the county that are noted, and then also in this system, it sure looks like there's water heading towards San Felipe Springs from recharge to the north here. In an aquifer, before there's any pumping, we scientists call it an equilibrium or dynamic equilibrium. So you get less amounts of recharge when there's a drought, because there's not as much rainfall, and then you get less amounts of spring flow. So we've seen that historically here at Las Moras Springs, including in the limited data before there was substantial pumping, where the springs went up and the springs went down. So now let's throw in some pumping. Somebody drills a well. I think the early wells, and there might even still be some wells here where they were drilled and just were free-flowing wells. I know there used to be one over here somewhere. So where's that water coming from? It's intercepting water that would have normally come out of the springs. Not passing judgment on that one way or the other. If people want to use the aquifer, there's going to be an impact on spring flow. Earlier, Bill Bunch mentioned San Antonio and San Pedro Springs in San Antonio mostly are dry now, and that happened after San Antonio started putting in flowing artesian wells that intercepted groundwater flow that previously would have gone to the springs, but now is going to the wells. And these days, it's very rare to see those springs flow. So as more wells go in, you're basically having to scavenge that water. Those wells are scavenging the water from water that used to come out of, or would have come out of the springs. And so that becomes a key question of a balance between, if you want to keep the springs flowing, then how do you limit or control how much pumping in order to achieve those spring flows? I work in San Marcos at San Marcos Springs. I'm going to gently correct Bill. Where is Bill? There he is. Normally, we're the second largest spring system, but with this drought, we've been the largest spring system in the state. I like to brag about it, but it's for a sad reason. Yeah. Comal's not flowing as well these days. Also because of the drought, same drought that y'all are suffering. But San Marcos and Comal Springs are flowing today because of the Edwards Aquifer Authority's management of the system to protect those spring flows. And so there is a drought management that as we go in the drought, the users have to restrict or lower their usage, and that's to preserve the spring flows in those two springs. So back to Kinney County, so we've got this flow system, we've got this pumping, and one key thing in groundwater is like, are you managing sustainably or not? Many aquifers, like the Ogallala Aquifer in the Texas High Plains, Amarillo through Lubbock, we're pumping that aquifer at 6 times the rate the water is coming back in. That's how I managed my checking account when I was an undergraduate in college. I think I had an overly large margarita budget. It's not going to have a happy ending. And they are experiencing decreasing water levels in the aquifer. They're draining the aquifer. Innumerable springs have dried up there over time along the escarpment. They don't have springs as dramatic as this one, but they're still, again, what goes down must come up in aquifers. And so springs certainly, flows have been intercepted and used for pumping. In the Edwards Aquifer, typically these systems are managed sustainably. Barton Springs does this. Again, drought restrictions to preserve spring flow. I've already mentioned the Edwards Aquifer Authority. There's some Edwards rocks out near Fort Stockton. Used to feed Comanche Springs. Comanche Springs is mostly failed these days, but that system is managed in a way to be sustainable over time. But when a spring dries up or starts drying up, it is like a canary in the coal mine in the sense that it's an indication that maybe the pumping is getting out of balance with the water that's coming in. And so that could cause some problems. In other words, the aquifer is not able to support the pumping that's occurring. And so it's a little bit of a warning signal that maybe the pumping is a little out of whack, or too high to where it doesn't become a sustainable use of the aquifer. And so again, there's ways that aquifers can be managed in a sustainable way, with examples all along the Balcones escarpment through the Edwards Aquifer. One other thing I'll say before I get to the question is, in Kinney County, you have what's called the Edwards Balcones Fault Zone Aquifer, which is pretty much what you see in this map here, what you see in the state maps. And then you have the Edwards Trinity Plateau Aquifer. And that geometry is there because the state, the Water Development Board, has a Trinity Aquifer, there's an Edwards Aquifer, and then when you get out over here, you get Edwards Trinity, and they're trying to figure out how to sew it all together to where it makes sense. So to a certain degree, there's a little bit of arbitrariness to where those lines are drawn in Kinney County. I'll just say this, that the Edwards is the Edwards is the Edwards. So it isn't two separate aquifers in the county. It's predominantly the Edwards Aquifer. The flow system is all connected there. How do we figure out where recharge comes from and where it's going to and what's going on? As hydrogeologists, we measure water levels in wells. Might seem a super basic, easy thing to do, but if you can learn a lot from water levels in wells, particularly elevations relative to sea level, because water generally will flow from a higher level to a lower level. So if we have measurements across the county or across an aquifer, we can then map out where the water's coming from and where it's going to. And then also over time, we can see what's happening. It's like a dipstick in your engine. Where's the oil in that engine? Are you fixing to burn up the engine or not? That water level information provides good information there. Also in karst aquifers, because the water flows so fast, we can do tracer tests. So something is dumped in the water, typically a dye, and then people are sampling to see where does it come out. Karst aquifers can be very complicated in that way, as opposed to a sandstone aquifer like the Carrizo that Bill mentioned earlier. We can also learn a lot from the water chemistry, how temperature changes, how the amount of salt in the water changes over time. There's these fancy chemistry called isotopes that can be used to learn more there. And then that information oftentimes is brought together into a numerical groundwater flow model. So it's a computer model of the aquifer. there's a famous saying. It's been attributed to me, but I stole it from somebody else. All models are wrong. Some are useful. So the challenge is figuring out which ones are useful and not so useful. Now I'm a recovered groundwater modeler. So, I don't do it anymore, but I do love picking them apart. And I can still do that. But what I love about modeling is it brings all your information together to see if it works. But it is an approximation of a system. And there's something called in the modeling world non-uniqueness, where you can have completely different parameters in a model and still calibrate it. In other words, get it to reproduce spring flow, maybe get it to reproduce water level changes. And so that brings us back to the MAG. So we mentioned that I worked on the first groundwater availability model, which was turned into a program to generate models for the state, aquifers across the state, to ultimately determine how much you can pump to achieve these desired future conditions. So the desired future conditions that Bill talked about, that's the goal. So like Barton Springs, Edwards Aquifer Conservation District has a defined goal of how much spring flow they want, minimum spring flow they want at Barton Springs during a repeat of the drought record. 7.5 cubic feet per second, Bill, is that what it is? That's what I'm remembering. And then they manage around that. The model, groundwater availability model, is used to go, okay, how much can we pump with the repeat of the drought record, which affects how much recharge is coming in? How much can we pump and not violate that minimum goal? And that is what's referred to as the modeled available groundwater number. And so that then becomes an indication of what can be produced. That number goes into the district's groundwater management plan, and it goes into the regional water plan. So if the regional water planning group, or really anybody in the state, is looking for water, they can't go above that modeled available groundwater number after considering what's currently being pumped in the district. The models can be wrong. And so the getting back to the specific question, it does appear that the model that's being used or has been used for the aquifers in Kinney County, it shows about 10 times as much water in there as there should be. And this came about, I don't know the details, and it's probably best I not try to explain to you what I think they might be, but there were really high estimates of how much was being produced. It was about 10 times what was actually happening. And then that got put into a model which showed that you could pump 70,000 acre feet and still have spring flow. Again, I'm a recovered modeler. I still love modeling, but nothing beats real world data. And so you all have seen real world data where the drought, the pumping that's occurred has caused the springs to fail. So ultimately, there is an opportunity for the model available groundwater value to be revised. That is important because that number sets expectations. That is a real important number in water planning. But I'll say this, what's most important is that desired future condition, because the desired future condition, the districts are supposed to achieve that. And if they don't, pass rules to achieve the desired future condition and then enforce those rules, they can be subject to a petition to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality that can then lead to enforcement action from the commission, including the dissolution of the district. There isn't language like that for the modeled available groundwater number. And I think that's appropriate because the model available groundwater number, that's an estimate. That's best available science. And sometimes the best available science sucks. And I'll say that up front as a scientist. Hopefully we learn more and get better over time. The models get better, learn from our mistakes. But that goal is really, really key. So I'll leave it at that.
I think about 3 questions, but before, one of my sons is a Red Raider, and he would feel it important for me to tell you that halftime score, Texas Tech 13, BYU 7. Now we'll get back to water.
Okay, I want to ask you a question. Okay, as hydrogeologist, can you explain to me the data that you have? This is the aquifer that's for the springs, right? But there's an aquifer that's below that. Is that true?
The Trinity,
The
yes.
Trinity. And does that have enough water for all of our agriculture to be plentiful and good?
I don't believe so.
You don't? Oh, I have another data.
Okay.
Very
That's fine.
different data.
We can talk later. We can talk later. Got a question way. I can probably repeat. We'll go to the back and I can repeat it. He said what? Um, so Dr. Hutchinson said missing the DFC once is insignificant. The law doesn't say that. It probably depends on, I'm speculating here, probably depends how the district responds. Now, note when I talked about not achieving the DFC, not passing rules, not enforcing those rules, somebody has to file a petition. Nobody files a petition, nothing happens. Now, if you're a district and you miss the DFC, my advice to a district would be, you ought to be doing something active to ensure that doesn't happen in the future. In other words, you respond to that occurrence, such that if somebody does file a petition, you can defend yourself to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or maybe even convince the petitioner that you've responded in a way such that that won't happen in the future, that you learned. But there's nothing in the statute doesn't say you get a gimme the first time. So it just depends. If nobody's complaining or filing a petition, you probably miss the DFC 50 times and it's insignificant. But somebody has to file a petition challenging that. I should note I'm not an attorney, but
I have a question. How much of an impact to the aquifers to these large data centers? Like, I believe it's a data center outside of Castroville. How much of an impact? Because I know those use a lot of water.
So the question is how might data centers impact aquifers? Data centers can use a tremendous amount of water. One thing I'm noticing with the ones coming to Central Texas is they're not only opening up gigawatt scale data centers, but they're also doing power plants with them. Depending how those power plants work, they could use a tremendous amount of water. On a data center, it depends. Are they going to do closed loop cooling rather than evaporative cooling? That's a big one. If they're going to do closed loop cooling and then, mechanical cooling, the water footprint is much lower. There's still a water footprint there, but it's like substantially lower. And then on the energy side, there's a plant going outside of San Marcos that's going to do gas turbine, but no cogen. They're not going to do steam electric associated with the gas turbine. Again, minimal water footprint. However, there's 10 gigawatts of data centers planned for the High Plains, Lubbock, Amarillo, and it appears that that's all going to be open loop with nuclear power generation, which means steam electric. And since they're doing open loop cooling on the data centers, it's probably going to be open loop cooling on the power. So looks like they're going to have a huge water footprint out there. I don't worry about data centers in the Edwards Aquifer under the authority of the Edwards Aquifer Authority or Barton Springs, because they have a cap on permits. So nobody can pump more water than what their permits are and the associated drought restrictions. And when we go into drought restrictions, and we're pretty much topping out the production. So a data center would have to go buy a water rights in the Edwards, in the under the authority's jurisdiction to use that water. But ultimately, it's not going to affect the long-term goals of the aquifer because again, there's a cap, and there's established reductions in use during droughts. It's a good question. I get that question a lot, particularly on the Edwards. Take another one. Oh no. Oh.
Mentioning the DFC. Have
Yes,
you
sir.
Seen the 2024 DFC for Kinney County.
I have not.
You know why you haven't?
I can speculate, but I won't in public.
I'll tell you why.
All right.
They haven't released it. It was supposed to be released in June. Officially went to start import on the 10th of October, according to the information here. And they still have not released them. Unless it's a process.
Yeah, I don't believe so since I've not.
Kind of hard. All the speculation coming up with it, we don't even know what the DFC is. That should tell you something about where the problem is.
And there should be an opportunity to, a public hearing once it gets decided for you all to weigh in or anybody to weigh in on that. So be looking for that opportunity because I believe that is a required part of the process there.
One more question here in the front.
Okay.
So I believe we have on the 16th of December, I believe we have a public hearing on the proposed groundwater for Kinney County.
So the comment is December 16th. Believes that there's a public hearing on groundwater rules for Kinney County, although they're
It's
proposed rules.
Yeah.
So there probably wouldn't be proposed rules for a new DFC. So it would probably be a separate public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. It'd probably be a separate public hearing for that, but probably.
Okay, Robert is not off the hook completely. There'll be more.
Our hands right there.
Ron Green.
I want to expand on it real quick. So there is no DFC program, but if you go to the board begging, these communities begging the board to come up with a drought plan, so we have something to see that will work. So we can say, look, we went to stage 2 and we were able to have a healthy flow. If they're absolutely uncooperative and roll their eyes and unprofessional, can we get a petition and just get them the hell out of there? And you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying.
I'm gonna ask you hold off on because I have as a key one of the few key topics for the panel discussion phase to talk about drought condition rules because it cuts across really all 3 of these areas, or certainly 2 of them. So if you don't mind, hold that thought, hold that question. Now let me introduce Dave Mauk somewhere. As he's coming up, I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit about it. Dave is the general manager of the Bandera County River Authority and Groundwater District. He's been with that district in Bandera since 2009. He serves on a plethora of regional this, planning that. I won't drag you all through it, but it's GMA 9, Region J, Plateau Planning Group, on and on and on. Very impressive involvement, not just within his little nucleus area of Bandera, but all over the place. Extensive experience in groundwater planning, management. Also, with all due respect to Bill and Robert, their bios are pretty lame in comparison to Mr. Mauk. He's a degreed chemist, Army paratrooper, and last but not least, 14 years, I believe it was, professional bounty hunter in Baltimore. So on that point, I'll turn it over. Again, I'm forgetting my kickoff question for Mr. Mauk. It is okay. Explain generally the routine actions groundwater district, permit applications, enforcement, engagement with the community, and one specific phenomenon in our county, maybe in Bandera, you tell us, but a phenomenon here is that a few dozen ranches, big and small, have pumping permits, but many, even most surrounding ranches do not. There are complicated hydrology issues lurking here, for example, about cones of depression. We can deal with that in the panel discussion period. But let me ask, how does your district juggle possibly conflicting property rights issues and interests in Bandera County? For instance, if pumping on one ranch has the effect of causing nearby springs or streams to go dry on nearby ranches, other ranches, and thus their land values impacted, how does that work from a property rights standpoint? And how does Bandera Groundwater District deal with that conundrum or that challenge?
Hey, how y'all doing? Guess I'll stand. It makes me feel powerful to be up high like this. Look down the pond, everybody. No, I'm just kidding. Look, I'm a bureaucrat. They're scientists. I know nuts and bolts of water management, how to run a district, things like that. Basically, groundwater conservation districts are the state's preferred method of groundwater management. That being said, all districts are pretty much different in how they were formed, maybe not in the way they were formed, like Chapter 36 or petition, but they're enabling legislation. They have different powers, different funding abilities for a variety of reasons. One, because they're in different parts of the state, in different areas. As much as a lot of people would like to think everything should be centralized out of Austin, different areas need to be handled differently. And the beauty of that is you have what's called local accountability. And that's the beauty of a local groundwater conservation district. I believe most of them are elected. So there's accountability here locally. I'm going to mainly speak a lot about how my district operates. Now, other districts could be different. But mine are a complete Chapter 36 district, but we're also a river authority. We're the only one in Texas, so we're also Chapter 36, 49, and 51. So we get into a lot more than just the groundwater. Basically, in a nutshell, our mission is to protect the natural resources of that area for the citizens of the county and the state of Texas, and groundwater being one of the principal ones. Now, groundwater conservation district has a lot of checks they have a lot of boxes to check, a lot of things they have to do statutorily. I saw people talk, a little bit of other panelists talking about management plans. That goes along with the desired future conditions, the DFC. I don't like that name, but that name was given to it by the legislature. Desired future conditions to me would be the aquifer's up or even better, but that's just not the way it's designed. It's a managed drawdown of the aquifer. Some parts of Texas, some districts have used it as a way to slowly deplete it. Unfortunately, that's what it looks like. So the districts have to get into the regional planning process. They have to get into the GMAs, groundwater management area. Sounds like you're in 7. I'm in 9. So the districts are required to work with the other districts in that groundwater management area to develop a desired future conditions of what they want to see the aquifer in that area over a period of time up to 50 years. And that is reviewed every 5 and can be reviewed even faster than that. Now, the management goals and management plan that the district is required to have by the state of Texas addresses that DFC. And in that management plan, they have to show how they are taking steps, employing rules, permitting wells to achieve that DFC. And that DFC will be a drawdown of the aquifer. Unfortunately, that's just the way it's designed. Now, the district has other things it has to do besides the Chapter 36 rules. It has to permit and register wells. Now, one of the things, some districts have some different enabling legislation of what's considered permit and what's considered an exempt registered well. I think it's really important for everybody here to understand something. It's semantics. We hear about permits. This person has a permit to pump. Well, anybody that has a domestic livestock well that meets those definitions in Chapter 36 is an exempt well, exempt from permitting, but they still have to get authority for the district and they still have to follow rules and they still have to do things. So when we talk about permittees and permitted wells, we don't want to forget those people. Because I don't know about here, but in Bandera County, the vast majority of the people are those domestic exempt wells. Now, the permittees generally throughout the state are permits required when pumping is above what would be a domestic well. So if you're looking at over 17.45 gallons a minute, you're looking at about 25,000 gallons a day. Because if you pump 24 hours a day, that's what you would get. That triggers a permit. Also triggers what the use is for. If it's for a household and below that 7.45, unless it's got a property restriction as far as the size and spacing, that's a registered exempt well. But it's important not to lose sight of those wells because that's the vast majority of the wells. And when you have pumping, those wells can affect the permittee and the permittee can affect them. So I feel like some people they forget about those people. Now, as far as permitting, when somebody comes in, they want a well, majority of them are exempt. We look at that. We do inspections. We go out and check, and that's for their benefit too. Also, we do inspections to make sure the driller's doing the right thing. We have some of the most robust construction standards in the state, and that's to protect the aquifer and the person getting the well drilled and their neighbors. Now, ones that don't meet that definition, they get permitted. Now, when you get permitted, at least in our district, and I think it's uniform now, you have to get a hydrogeological study. You have to have a PG, professional geoscientist, or an engineering firm come in and model. Hopefully they have data of what that pumping is going to do to the aquifer. And that's where it gets tricky. That's the problem. The permittee, and a lot of times this is lost. The permittee, the pumpers, the applicant, they have rights. And under Texas, it's a vested property right. However, they don't have a right to a certain amount of water. They have to have a beneficial use and the water has to be shored up. So here's the tricky part. They have property rights. So does the neighbors. So does the other permittees. So does the other people that have rights in groundwater. So you have to look at the pumping request versus what impacts it will potentially have to the aquifer, what the real world situations are on the ground, what the real data is saying, while looking at modeling, because like Dr. Mace said, modeling, it's a tool. And you have to look at it and you have to balance it. And if the permittee's got a beneficial use and the water's there, then the permit can be granted. They have a right to that. It has to be a beneficial use without weight. However, when you start looking into pumping and it's negatively affecting the neighbors and it's negatively affecting the drawdown of the aquifer, specifically if it's going after and causing a crisis with the DFC, that's problematic. So it doesn't benefit the permittee, the pumper, to get a permit that's going to deplete themselves because they'll probably deplete themselves first. It doesn't benefit the neighbors to get that. It doesn't benefit anybody. So that's the balancing act, and that's where emotions get strong, especially now with this drought. This drought's punishing. Bandera County is probably the epicenter of it. We're not quite sure why. We talked to federal officials. Why is the drought lingering so bad in Bandera? It's bad here, but it's bad in Bandera. I have some theories. Bandera is the cowboy capital of the world. We have a lot of bars and not a lot of churches. That might have something to do with it. I don't know. It's a hard one to sell to the public, but it's lingering. And I think we all know this when the people don't like to talk about it. It's getting hotter and drier. The desert's moving this way. Hopefully it's just a cycle and it goes back because I moved all the way out here jumping the river. I'm the general manager of a river authority on the Medina River with no river. It's gone. Medina Lake's at 4%. Sabinal. I know the headwaters of the San Antonio and the Oasis systems. And out here, the stuff going on with the springs, it's heartbreaking. But the rights of everybody has to be looked at also with the task of protecting the natural resources for the state. Water is life. Texas runs on water. If we run out of water, we got a problem. And there are areas we're running out of water. We're getting dry holes out where we are. The Middle Trinity is behaving horribly. The Lower Trinity, there's no natural communication between the middle and lower in Bandera. Other areas there are. And we have a mining situation now. They'll get back and forth geologists and say, well, it's not technically a mining situation. Well, when it goes down every single year for decades and once the pumping goes up, I'm just going to call it that. And people can argue the semantics of that. So we're in a bad position right now with Texas. And in the regional planning, it's all geared up. How are we going to get more supply? Oh, we pop more wells. Well, if we're in a drought and the aquifer is acting this way and the springs are stopping the flow, popping more wells may not necessarily be it. Something's going to have to change, or this area is going to feel it, especially Bandera. And I wish it would start to rain, and I wish it would get a little better. As far as other stuff with the district, I can tell you a little bit about us. We do surface water protection, environmental investigations, illegal dumping with law enforcement. We work hands on the ground with TCEQ, protecting the whole ecosystem holistically, because the surface water and groundwater are interconnected. Not always as close as people think, but they are. The systems are. Bandera, Middle Trinity might get 3% vertical recharge. Lower Trinity, water's ancient. We age date, it's like 20,000 years old. So that's the situation we have here. But you have to holistically look at things. Texas historically has broken surface water away and broken groundwater. And we need to look at the two together and see what the interaction is, because it's not simplistic all the time. My way, Lower Trinity, there's not going to be a spring coming out of the Lower Trinity. You know, the production zone's 800 feet down. That'd be one tough spring. The upper parts where the springs come, the Glenrose and all, well, the Glenrose is okay, but the upper Glenrose, it's dry. So there's no springs. That's because of rain. A lot of spring flow problems is the rain, but you have to look at whether pumping has something to do with it. And that's something that a district should always be mindful of. And the main things with the district is be accountable to the people, have full transparency. We got a transparency starts from the controller's office. We have basically has a culture of, you got a problem, you come in and talk to us. Let's see if we can get a solution. We're all in this together. We live in the area. We value the resource. We all want water to be here. Everybody needs to work together and find common ground and try to find the best way to manage this resource so that it's here and we don't look like we do much further west. I guess that's a little bit of a soapbox, but I figure I'm out here. I'm away from my jurisdiction. I can talk anyway. But it's a delicate thing with the permits, and I never knew that groundwater in Texas would be so contentious and litigious. I'm in court quite a bit, and everybody's going to get mad on one side or the other. It's just the reality of water in Texas, and hopefully that'll change. I think somebody back here. Yes, sir.
How much of the fracking water for oil wells goes back into checking?
How much does the fracking water?
Yeah, does it return back into the?
I would be a question for a geologist in the area. We don't have fracking out where we are. We're not lucky or unlucky enough to have oil and gas. It's not commercial plays anyway. They got to do class, I think, 4 injection wells or you talk about when they frack itself. That would be probably a area question that would vary throughout the state. Yes, sir.
Talking about Kinney County and Dina Lake, back in the 50s, right? They couldn't get water out of the lake, right? And right now we're at 3. So it's not something that's ever happened. It's going to happen right. Now, say that the desert's really, well, look, I don't really agree with you. Even tonight.
This is worse than the drought of the 50s. That's uniformly understood. It's hotter. This drought's been going on longer. You make the argument it started 2007 in Bandera. It's now going into 2026. We had 2 wet years, 15 and 17, only because we had floods. Otherwise, we've been slowly going down. The Lower Trinity, basically at the city of Bandera, has dropped about 400 feet since they drilled the wells back in the 50s. It's the last few years has dropped like 75, 90 feet. I can tell you, I know anecdotally a lot of people was up there in the drought of the 50s. That might be Medina County, but up at the headwaters of Bandera County, this is far worse than the drought of the 50s. It's gone on longer and it's gone on hotter. Medina County, you guys are a little luckier, I guess. Well, I live on the headwaters. The headwaters comes down to about my house, goes a little farther. It stops. It's gone. It gets them, it pulls up in Bandera. It's gone. It stops. There's a puddle. The lake's a dead pool. I don't know what else to say about that. To me, and then we could argue which one's worse. It's, well, I live pretty close. I'm on the headwaters in the Medina. I got 8 inches of rain. It didn't do anything but go up maybe 1% in Medina Lake. And I can tell you right now, our monitor wells continued to go down. I understand from Kerr County with all that rain they got, their monitor wells continued to go down because the drought is that bad. It's, you also got to realize something about the drought of the 50s. There's a lot more people here now. A lot more people, a lot more pool in that aquifer, and it's hotter. And this has been going on longer. It was about 5 years in the 50s. So, but I hope you're right. I hope.
You got, yep, things are a lot different. Well, I hope you're right.
And that's the reason they've had some places where they cleared the cedars. There's a lot of things.
I agree with you. Land management's important.
Yes, sir. In Medina County, I don't know if you know about this particular area, but as you drop off the Balconian Escarpment, there's kind of a cut through a hill. And I understand that there was a recharge well put at the bottom in the Verde Creek there, which has pretty much stopped the flow of that.
I don't know if it's stopped. Hold on for a second. Hey, Ron, do you know anything? I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you know anything about a recharge well at the Edwards there? No, I don't either.
Well, that's just a local story.
He's smarter than me, so he would know.
It's not there. I'm not aware of it. No, it's not. It's on the Verde.
No, I've never heard of that, ma'am. I'm sorry. And like I said, he's a scientist and he knows
I
these
just,
things.
in my mind, I always thought that affected the flow on the Verde Creek. Yeah.
So let me try now to round up Bill and Robert, if I didn't offend you too much with my crack about your lame biographies. If you'll come back up and we'll jump into panel discussion. All three.
Oh, right.
And we'll just have a seat up here and they'll pass the microphone around. I'll start off with a question. Actually, I'll start off with, I don't know where she went, but the question on drought rules. And this is legal issue, it's groundwater management issue. Just share your thoughts around the do's and don'ts, importance, the whatevers of drought condition groundwater management.
They're gonna play pop quiz. You have drought rules.
Anything that you think would be responsive to the lady's question earlier and the general topic.
Well, drought rules, they definitely could start at your local district. Local district should have a drought management plan, and they do. And that plan can vary greatly on what it will do, if it's going to be voluntarily restrictions or if it's going to be restrictions. Now, with the drought management plan, that only affects permanent wells. So when we go into drought restrictions, we get people with household wells all up in arms, but it's the permittees. And we don't have very good soil in Bandera County, so most of our permits are commercial. Some irrigation, but not as many as probably down here. We have a lot of rock. So they kick in based on the stages of the drought. Now, universally, we use the U.S. Drought Monitor. The problem with the U.S. Drought Monitor is sometimes it can be rosy. I know it doesn't look rosy when you see it. We're in severe all the time, but it's an agricultural drought. A lot of it's soil moisture. It doesn't necessarily follow the aquifer in the area you're in. Certain areas it might, our area doesn't. So we also rely on things like what the spring flow is, what the river flow is, how much rain we've actually had, what our monitor wells look like. And we can use any data we use, but we do generally try to base it with the same levels as the drought monitor when we can. Because there'll be times it'll say, oh, it's just abnormally dry and we're still in a severe drought. So that being said, each area would have to independently look at how they would have to have a drought management. Now, if you're in a town too, like here, you have public water supplies. TCQ requires them to have drought management plans. Most districts, they give a permit. I believe all districts are going to require them to have a drought management plan. And that has to be followed. Now, how well the public water supply follows it, that could be something else. But they're important. We had some times at Bandera, things were getting bad, and Bandera put some drought management out after talking to us, implemented drought management plan, and we actually saw the aquifer pop up a little bit. And people were like, oh, did we get recharge? It was no, people stopped watering their grass. But that's also a contentious issue. But as far as the board putting drought management, I think somebody asked the Texas Water Development Board. I don't know where they're not a regulatory agency, they're a science agency. That's up to the individual districts and TCQ.
Can you expand it?
Real quick, Robert, let me just tack on.
Real quick, I'm sorry. Have you ever heard of not having any drought plan at all? For Texas, has that been ever heard of that happening? Because we don't have nothing.
They have the regional water plan that was built that was implemented after the drought of record in the 50s. And that's through the regional planning group. As far as water development board itself, implementing restrictions or anything, no, I don't think they do that. I mean,
I guess I'm not as familiar with drought plan requirements for districts, but districts can have drought restriction. Groundwater districts can have drought restrictions in their rules. They tend to. There are districts that don't have drought restrictions in their rules because their aquifers aren't terribly responsive to changes in rainfall and drought. Although you will see water levels go down more because people are pumping more, but like Ogallala districts, I don't think they have drought restrictions. They have an overall restriction, but aquifers like this that are very responsive to rainfall and drought, and there's things that the locals might cherish, like a spring, then yes, you do see those. Barton Springs, Edwards Aquifer Authority, Clearwater District, they're all Edwards districts that have drought restrictions.
So the question would seem to be that given there are no drought restriction permitting rules here in Kinney County, is it completely discretionary with the groundwater district board, or is there a way to compel it? And this may be more Bill.
Maybe you know about that 36. I know. I thought there was.
I don't think the statute says you have to have them. But I'm not 100% certain. I'm the districts I've been working with, they all have them. And typically they're in stages where if you're in a minor drought, you have a little bit of a cutback in pumping requirements. And then as the drought gets worse, all the permittees, or at least most of them, are required to cut back substantially to 30%, 40% below their permitted capacity. But that's a great question. I don't know if there's a legal way you could compel the district to have a drought management plan that has that required stepwise cutback requirements.
When San Antonio's in drought stage 4, you have nothing here. I mean, not even they don't want to have the conversation, like kick it down the road. And I just know what we can do, get a petition and get our leader out of there. He's not protecting the resources of the community. He's protecting the resources for only a community. That's not fair. Yes.
Okay. part of the result of not having one is violating the DFC. And so that's your recourse is like, they have to take action to move towards meeting that their own desired future condition standard.
Thank you for that question. Let me shift to a different subject, toss it to the three of you. How should we, Kinney County folk, how should we evaluate conflicting hydrologist opinions around groundwater? And let me give a couple of examples to illustrate what my question is getting at. A couple of years ago, a firm was hired, hydrologist firm was hired by a landowner in the Pinto Valley up yonder, and reached a conclusion that there's no connection between pumping in the Pinto Valley and Los Moras Spring. I happened to be at the Groundwater District meeting in May of the year following that, May 2024, doesn't matter. And I heard Dr. Hutchison at that meeting say that he thinks there is probably connection between pumping in the Pinto Valley and Los Moras Spring. So a discrepancy and seemingly in hydrologist viewpoints. Another, I don't know if this is a discrepancy, but I throw it out to illustrate the question. In 1966, there was what's called the Garza study done for the Water Development Board, and I'll quote from it. It said, quote, if the irrigation development west and southwest of Brackettville, so south of 90 and just straight west of here, continues to increase, Los Moras Springs may cease flowing for longer periods. And of course, when I read that, I think sounds pretty familiar. We've had going on 5 years of ceasing flowing for longer periods. But on the other hand, in the last month Kinney County District meeting, the new hydrologist, Mr. Claus, said that the Austin Chalk Aquifer in that south of Highway 90 area and the Edwards Aquifer are separate. How do the, not to get into trying to resolve those minutia questions, but more general, as a general proposition, what's the way that these seeming to a layperson, these hydrology disagreements or differences of expert opinions, how do they get properly resolved and sorted out and determine who's on first, what's on second, or however you want to put it?
My advice is look who the author was, and if it says Mace, put that one on top. But a serious answer is, as scientists, we don't always agree, and so having a formal peer review, which is a common part of science, like science is just not one person doing a study, putting out there and saying this is a fact. That's not how science works. You know, there should be a peer review, having some other experts take a look at that and opine on that topic. You know, and then that becomes something of a discussion, hopefully. Sometimes I find, like if I'm in disagreement with another scientist, sometimes I find that, you know, maybe we're using terminologies in a different way, or maybe a conclusion was overgeneralized or generalized more than, you know, I would have preferred, and that we might have more in common than not. There's also other ways where you could bring in, you know, try to bring in a panel of scientists. You know, we tend to behave better when we're in a clump of people, you know, where there is the back and forth. Generally, if it's a good scientist, you know, we're okay with being wrong. Our goal is to find out, you know, the closest approximation of what's really happening with what the truth is. So it does become a dialogue, and that is kind of frustrating. But I will say this, I do agree with Bill Hutchison's assessment of that report.
The connection.
Yeah, I'll put that on a report and you can put it on top.
Is there anything besides a study from 1966? Who funded this study and why do we not evaluate what's going on right now? 1966, a long time ago. I was 8 years old. So we need to evaluate with these studies, who funded these studies and how can we get more help from some grant or somebody to help us down in here, cause I cry every time I see this spring go dry.
Question is, if you didn't hear it, you projected well, but just in case, is like we've got these old studies going way back, and you know what do we have that's new or newer on there, and also who funded the studies, and then could those same sources be tapped for additional studies?
Yeah, and how can we fund more? How can we solicitate our congressmen and our representatives to help us here? We're trying, man.
So I'm with you on like the newer studies. We have we have better equipment. We also benefit as scientists for standing on the shoulders of the folks that worked before us, as well as all that data. And and even like I love the old data. So there is value in those old studies. Provides some clues into how the system's working. But I also agree that we haven't done all the work here that needs to be done. Now, Garza, I believe, was a U.S. Geological Survey scientist. And so the U.S. Geological Survey did a lot of the early studies. Water Development Board did a lot of early studies out here as well. There are some studies that are being funded by some philanthropic groups out here. I've got my graduate student, Corinne Kemper. Raise your hand. She's being funded by an endowment from the Meadows Foundation that I have as to support graduate student research. So raise your hand again. There she is. So there are folks looking and doing it, but more fun. It's a good thought. Yeah, we need more recent data, and then we need to try and find some more information to advance that forward. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to chime in here and try to clarify, and y'all can disagree if you think. The science has really progressed, and at this point, I think it's very clear that in Kinney County, if you want sustained yield and you want to protect the spring flows, you've really got to limit the pumping down somewhere in that 5 to 10,000 acre feet of pumping per year, not up at that 60 or 70,000. And that's, Dr. Mace said, they basically overestimated it 10 times, 65,000 versus, 6,500. And to me, the science at this point, there's a pretty broad consensus of folks that that's where we are. And that's really where the district's board needs to be moving towards. If we're not going to, and the other thing is, all of y'all are scientists. You saw the springs dry these last few years. And you can't rely on the old stuff that said, oh, that's not going to happen. Because it's happening. We're seeing it. And it doesn't take a scientist to see that there's a serious problem here. And this updated science maybe actually is matching with the reality that we're all observing.
Excellent points.
I guess I just want to, my name is Suzanne Main. I guess I just want to say that whatever concerns we may have, we have lots of data. I mean, for Kinney County, for the groundwater conservation district head. I mean, Janelle Hobbs, she's our general manager. She knows, we hear, when we go to the meetings, we hear about the monitoring wells that are being put in and that there is more data coming. Dr. Hutchinson had a series of reports that he did before he chose to leave supporting us. And those reports had 3 different zones, and they correlated wells to zones to the spring. So it's not that we don't have data. I think we're struggling with the different interests within the county about what to do with the data, or who thinks the spring has anything to do with the pumping or with the drought? And, one solution I've heard for the DFC is we're just going to change the DFC. So we don't have to worry about the spring anymore. So we just won't have to worry about that and we'll pick something else. And that's a solution, but I don't think that's a solution that benefits the residents, not the citizens, the residents in this county. So I appreciate your concern, but there is lots of data. Yeah, there's lots of data that maybe people aren't really aware of, but we do hear about it when we go to the groundwater conservation meetings, and I would suggest everybody go, even though sometimes it's hard.
It was clarified, and data as we study it, as we progress, people still studying that, and it helps us. It's not outdated data from '66. People still analyzing what's affecting us today from that study, but I kind of just wonder, hell, I was 8 years old when they studied that.
I appreciate the reality check. As a scientist, one of our conclusions is always more study is needed. So, but I
More
agree.
study and more grant money.
Yeah, more study, more grant money. But it's honestly more study. There's always more
Get
study.
money. That's my question. Who do we need to go as a community in the Senate, the state, or wherever to get the money to help us? Who do we need to contact? Congressman or whatever. I'll be happy. I'm kind of just getting involved. I'm just now retired. So guys, I'm a nice guy, but water's a big issue with me.
Yes, sir.
Need that money. Find out.
How many counties
They got the
are
money.
here in Texas that depend on that aquifer?
Which aquifer?
Edwards aquifer.
Oh, how many counties depend on the Edwards aquifer?
Oh,
We don't depend on it.
The follow-on question.
It's a lot.
So my follow-on question is, all these counties that have these underground water districts, and they each have their own set of rules for drawing that water out of that aquifer, how can we get some sort of standardization that says, well, Uvalde County is drawing more than Kinney County or Medina County? Where are we going to level out that aquifer if somebody's draining it off to the east or the west or to the north or the south?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm not going to speak specifically to the Edwards. I can tell you, say the Trinity. The Trinity's huge. We're in the Trinity. How the Trinity behaves in my county is 100% different than how it behaves in other counties. So an allotment of what works up there potentially and most likely will not work where I am, and vice versa. The aquifers do not necessarily behave uniformly, and Robert can speak a lot more to this. I'm getting more on the management tools. It wouldn't work. If you found what is a lot of water up north, might not even exist where I am. There's parts about the Trinity, portions of the Trinity don't even communicate with themselves in my county, where in other parts they do. So it's a complex system when you try to loop in an entire aquifer and have a standardized system of permittees, how much water they can get. To the point that in Bandera County, how the middle and lower Trinity behaves in one section of county can be completely different down the street. How it behaves on one property can be completely different than right down the road. We got Middle Trinity wells in Bandera County being drilled that are coming in at 1 gallon a minute in certain areas. Other areas, you might get 30 gallons a minute. It's just so that it's impossible to put a blanket management style over an entire aquifer. Now, Robert probably knows a heck of a lot more about the Edwards. The Edwards is a different animal. I don't know if you could do that in the Edwards.
I guess the concern you expressed, and if you didn't hear it in the back, is each district has the ability to. This is really loud. Yeah. Okay.
They need to hear you in the back.
Each district has its own rules, just as you said, and that has been a concern. And the way the legislature's dealt with that is through these groundwater management areas. And so when districts within a groundwater management area get together collectively to determine desired future conditions,
they're required to make sure that what their management goals are work together. In other words, you don't have a district next door that's planning to drain the aquifer completely next door to a district that's trying to manage it sustainably to protect spring flow. And so that's how the legislature has dealt with that concern at this point. Not going to say it's perfect and it's working perfectly, but that's presently how they're trying to do it. Yeah, the Edwards, Ron Greeny and I and some others have conversations. Like, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of water or a big connection between Kinney County to the east. And so what's happening over there is, and in the hill country, is unlikely to be having any effect in Kinney County. And that what's affecting Kinney County is, local pumping, as well as locally where the recharge is coming in and replenishing the aquifer.
I'll just mention, not for any further discussion on this, but related to your question and your comment, it's not just different districts approaching an aquifer in different fashion. We're just 15 miles or something from area where there is no groundwater district. You don't have to go very far. As soon as you get to Valverde County, there's no groundwater conservation district there. So it would just be the ball game, I think, as I would understand it, would be just that ball game that Dr. Mace was referencing, the regional planning. Somebody handed me a couple of questions. I'm going to read both of these and then let them talk about them. Any data or anecdotes about regenerative farming methods improving aquifer levels? Can an injection well be fed with desal water to replenish the aquifer? So that's a big, really one. I'll hand the microphone off on that.
Go ahead. That's next. Go for it. All right. Let's see. I'll do the last one. Can desalinated water be injected into an aquifer? Short answer is yes. There's some regulatory hoops you would have to jump through. You'd have to get an injection well permit from Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They want to make sure that when you inject water different than the aquifer into the aquifer, it doesn't cause any weird chemical reactions, but you can certainly do that. There are places in the state that do aquifer storage and recovery. So, for example, Kerrville takes excess water under their surface water permit on the Guadalupe, treat it, inject it into the lower Trinity aquifer, and then during peak summer season and maybe during droughts even, pull that water out. San Antonio does this. I think Buda is doing this now. There's some other communities. El Paso takes treated wastewater and recharges their local aquifer up there. So yes, it's certainly possible to do that.
What are we doing in Kinney County? Anything? Is it a neutral subject? Nobody.
I don't think anybody's doing that right now. Now it takes money. You desal water, it costs some money. Then you gotta get the permits and inject it and do whatever monitoring Texas Commission on Environmental Quality wants you to do.
But right now, we're not affected in Kinney County.
No, not that I'm aware of. And I think there was an earlier question about, I thought maybe it was the Arroyo Seco sinkhole. So there were some actions by the Edwards Underground Water District, which was the predecessor agency of the Edwards Aquifer Authority, that put in place some enhanced recharge features. Maybe half a dozen that are still active, managed by the authority. I had a graduate student look at efforts to increase recharge in the Edwards Aquifer. And what we found was, it did put water into the aquifer, but it was that you really needed to do it at a massive scale to have a big impact. And then when do you need the water the most? During a drought. And you ain't no rain, there ain't no water in the creek to divert into the enhanced recharge. So it had a minimal to zero impact during droughts when you would really need the benefit. So the conclusion with those features was, that they weren't working very well. Now, if you did a desal and injected, you're not tied to droughts there. But you have to be careful. Like, where are you getting that desal water from?
About that question. Who's approving this? The EPA or what outfit is up in front of that?
It's so if there's production of brackish groundwater, and if there's a district, you would have to get a permit there. Although I think there are some exceptions now, depending where you're pulling the desal water out. And then again, the injection is Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, essentially acting on behalf of the Environmental Protection Agency. What was the first? Oh, regenerative.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about regenerative agriculture?
I don't. I can't help on that.
On regenerative agriculture, I'm not an expert. I know a little bit. I've done a little bit of reading. It's like taking what I understand is like you can do soil amendments, biochar being one that helps increase water withholding capacity of soils for growing crops. So that helps you if you're irrigating because you're retaining more of that water in the soil rather than having it evaporate or perhaps leaking back down to the aquifer. And during rainfalls, it would hold more. So, and there seems to be promising data on using techniques like that to use water more efficiently that allows you to irrigate with less water.
We're going to keep it going. Mr. Mauk is going to probably just have time for participating in one more question. He said he's got to go deal with some animals. I don't know if that's, but let me hand it here. But after Mr. Mauk has to leave, we'll keep going a little bit longer, another 15 minutes probably, with Dr. Mace and Mr. Bunch.
Thank you. I've got two questions. One's a scientific questions and one is more of a legal management question. So answer them in whatever order you want. So the first question is, if I thought of the aquifer as my body and I dehydrated to the point I could damage my kidneys. It's a lot of complex systems and interacting. So I could damage my brain. So if the aquifer was depleted to a certain point, could that cause geological changes underground to where these pathways might not exist in the same way they do today, and we could permanently damage the aquifer? And the other question is, I saw a cowboy ride in here, right? So I'm kind of a brash individual, so I'd like a non-sugar-coated answer. How might this all play out from a legal and a groundwater management? I want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly of how this has happened in other places. I'm sure some people had success, some people failed, sometimes the state helped, sometimes they didn't. Just kind of a scenario rundown, and then the scientific question.
Why don't you go on the science part? So he needs to go.
I don't know about the bad and the ugly, but the good is 24/7 halfway through the fourth quarter. So it's looking good for regulators.
I'm not sure what I was asking.
Science question.
When you water. Oh, you water. No, I'm not really sure what the management question was.
Like, how might this really play out? I figure it's going to go to the courts. It could go
It's
back.
in the courts all the time. I'm in court. I get deposed several times a year. I just
But like, what
went
kind of
through a
stuff
trial.
happens? Groundwater districts get dissolved.
No.
People are sued for massive amounts of money. The things like what kind of scenarios does this end up in?
And water management in Texas is litigious and it's contentious. Now, there's several aspects that can happen. If a permit is challenged, either by the applicant, or the district doesn't approve it, so the applicant challenges it, or another member of the public, environmental group, a municipality, a member of the public challenges it. Like they don't like the decision for a permit. They generally go to the State Office of Administrative Hearings if they do properly what they're supposed to do with the district. District can hold a contested case hearing and have a hearings examiner, but the majority of them seem to go up to what's called SOA. And when it goes there, the general manager, because I go through this somewhat often, the general manager has to go up and put on a case in front of the State Office of Administrative Hearings law judges and to put on a case of why I recommended this or why the district did this. The applicant puts on a case. The contestant, if there's a third party person contesting it, they put on a case. Judges decide what's going to happen. They give a recommendation. It's a non-binding recommendation, but it's one that has some parameters legally of when it can or cannot be followed. It's sent back to the district, and then the board will vote on what the recommendation is of SOA. If the applicant or the protestant does not like that, they have the option to then go to district court and go through the Texas court system. They can do some federal action, but generally it's going to go through the district court. And then it might make its way all the way to Texas Supreme Court. Generally, the court, if they rule with the applicant or they rule that, one of the other protestants, they will tell the district to either reconsider it or they will just strike it and give them what they want. If the district wins, say a permittee does not like what a district did and the permittee loses and the district wins, then that permittee can bring in what's called a takings claim. And that's in the state constitution, but it's not as easy to win one as people think it is. You have to show what the harm was that was done to you economically, and there's guidelines to it. And then if that happens, monetary awards can be awarded to the permittee. And it's happened in the past. And then the district would have to pay those monetary awards or get into some sort of payment option. As far as dissolving districts through that kind of stuff, no, I don't see how that would happen. But there's a variety. That's a very up here level of what it's like. But there's so many different nuances in the court systems and the legal systems with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are provisions that dissolve districts in statute, but TCQs would step carefully, I guess, on doing it. They would do everything to get the district into compliance.
That's no, it's that other.
I still have the scientific.
Yeah.
Go ahead, bud.
Yes, good afternoon. This is a question for Mr. Mauk. Earlier in your comments, you said, if I heard correctly, that the desired future condition, DFC, is a quote, drawdown, end quote. My fear is, and I hope I'm wrong, is that drawdown might mean depletion. But my question is, can you explain to us what you meant by the DFC being a drawdown, please? Thank you.
Our desired future conditions, I'll look at GMA 9, by GMA 9. Our desired future conditions is a 30-foot drawdown of the Trinity Aquifer over the course of that DFC's in force. To me, that's not a desired future conditions. That's a drawdown. And that's what it is. It's for the most part a managed drawdown. Now, say you wanted to have something less and you put in a DFC that had less drawdown, but then you get your managed available groundwater back. The state, the Water Development Board can tell you that's not achievable because of the amount of pumping that's coming. So it's kind of designed in a way to protect the aquifer, but at the same time, you have to understand these aquifers, with the increased pumping, the increased population, the increased demand, even if the drought subsided, the way they work here is we're going to have water problems in Texas, and especially this area of Texas and where I am. Other areas, Houston, towards the Gulf Coast, they got water. There's lakes everywhere. There's water and grass everywhere. It's a different reality. But the DFC it's a drawdown.
Doesn't have to be though.
It doesn't. You can try.
The vast majority of them across the state are indeed drawdowns. Where they are not drawdowns, though, are in these what I call highly responsive aquifers, which is what you have here in Kinney County. And so the Edwards DFCs, they're not drawdown DFCs.
Well, that's true. I'm more speaking to what
you're doing. Yeah.
Like we have some Edwards in the western end of our county, and the DFC there, because we don't have permitted wells, we don't even put a DFC for it. But that would be one like he's talking about. So Dr. Mace is correct.
Can you clarify drawdown? What you're
Oh.
by that?
Drawdowns, it's 0, -1, -2, -3, -4.
Water level declines in the aquifer. So
Well, over a long period of time.
Yeah, it's like 50 years. It's not. With this drought, it's been troubling because of what the levels of the drawdowns of the aquifer per year have been. So it's definitely troubling.
It's like the Ovalal aquifer. It's going down about foot a year. So every year you come back and measure water level, it's down a foot, down a foot, down a foot. It's been doing that for decades.
Engineers take exactly. Most people don't know how they measure a well. And the engineer's tape or inch. Most people don't know that. Do you understand, folks, how they measure a well? The engineer's tape is in tenths of an inch.
Yeah, yeah.
Not right?
Steel tape, yeah, steel tape. There's electric lines that make a connection with the water down the well, and they beep and it tells you. But if you got pipe in the hole from pumps, then yeah, generally you're using steel tape. Yeah.
Engineer's tape.
All right. Say hi to your dogs for me.
So this discussion prompts me to ask something. I don't know if this is reality, but all that discussion about MAG and DFCs and adjusting drawdowns and adjustments makes me wonder, is there a conceivable seesaw effect around, okay, if we can't meet the DFC with a 70,000 MAG, 70,000 acre foot MAG, can a district just say, we're going to adjust the DFC to where 70,000 acre foot MAG is plausible, viable? Is that an option that the district has, is just to alter the DFC to make that, and just referencing back the quoting Dr. Hutchison, he has said 7,000 acre feet seems to be the approximate kind of MAG level in hydrology reality. So I don't know if that's a sensible question, but do the best you can with it. Okay.
I mean, the answer is yes, they can, with the caveat that there'd have to be a way of figuring out what the DFC is that would allow 70,000 acre feet a year. And so it'd have to be a tool to do that. And since we haven't seen 70,000 acre feet of pumping, or we haven't seen north of 15,000 acre feet of pumping, we don't know. We don't know what those impacts are, which means you need a numerical groundwater flow model to determine what the desired future condition is. So it may be that the system cannot support 70,000 acre feet per year. That everybody dries up with that. I mean, that could be an outcome, without appropriate technical analysis.
Jason, I think Sharon, you each had one more. Sharon.
Gentleman back there.
Here, so can the aquifer be permanently damaged?
Oh, right.
Permanently
Yeah.
beyond its normal level by changing the pathways of water geologically?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot your technical question there. Question is can the aquifer be permanently damaged through a severe lowering of the water levels? I mean, it's possible. I don't have any personal experience with that happen. There's some technical stuff I don't want to go into, but there could be a change in how much water the aquifer can store. The comment you made about if there's conduits down there, the water is helping to hold up the land surface. And so when you de-water it, you can get collapsed sinkholes that could affect water quality. And a lot of aquifers, when you have severe depletions, you can have saline water intrusion. So there is, as you go deeper into the aquifer, you are hitting brackish water. And so when the water levels on the fresh side get lower than the water levels on the salty side, you start getting saline intrusion. And it's really hard to get, once you get salty water into an aquifer, it's hard to get it out. So it would require a lot of flushing.
I'd like to go back to the MAG at being at 60 or 70,000. And the thing that happens is when you have developers that want to start developing, like in Castroville, and they maybe want to come over here and they look at our MAG, and the MAG says, hey, we got lots of water. So that's what happens when these developments start. And it has been started. We did send a letter to the GMA 7, which is the regional. The regional has come back to Kinney County and said, we need correct information. But Kinney County is the one that's going to have to change that mag. And we have to depend on them to do it. Now they've been a groundwater for 20 some odd years. If we do not have, they do not even put on their deal about having a drought plan to regulate the agriculture or the water. In over 20 years, we don't have it. We're probably, if not the only one of the only ones that do not have a drought plan. And so that's why it's so important to know what's going on and what our groundwater board is doing. There's going to be a new election this next year. Y'all need to be looking at that. You need to be going online, and every one of the groundwater meetings are videoed and they're on there. You don't have to go to the meeting. You can go on and you can look at how they're doing their meetings.
I'm going to bring it back to questions to our experts while we got them. We need to take advantage of putting questions to them. Yes, ma'am.
From the Bitcoin manufacturers, the Chinese have got a big land, a massive land in Sunflower Farm along above Comstock. They're along the source of our water. And then up in Odessa, we have Bitcoin manufacturers. They use massive amounts of electricity and water. That is why we're without water. Has anybody considered that? I think that should be delved into and resourced and checked on by the USGS.
Yeah, so Bitcoin mining is kind of in the same area as data centers with the water for cooling and then the consumption. So yeah, that is something, it's for whatever reason, I don't know why, Bitcoin did seem to be causing concerns on the water side, but with the data centers, these huge data centers coming in, now that's on the front burner. So there are people doing research on that to try and provide information that could go to the Water Development Board, build that into the water plans. And there are our districts, anybody that's in the water world right now, we're all talking about data centers and the associated water needs for the power. So it's front and center. Everywhere I go, questions about this come up, and I'm literally everywhere I go, it comes up. So you're not alone.
But is there pumping in our relevant geographic area that
I don't think there's any pumping in your area associated with Bitcoins or data centers that's affecting the springs.
Where is it? Oh, where's the production of Bitcoin? It's on our upstream source of water. That's why the lake dried up, is because of all the Bitcoin manufacturers upstream.
I'm not clear on the exact geographic area you're talking about, but this map shows, this is the area up in here that's the contributing watershed that then feeds down into Kinney County, that then feeds the well or the springs here. And if you're talking about pumping outside of this area, then it will not affect well levels or spring flows in here. So that area up by Midland, et cetera, they're not connected here.
And what about the area along from Comstock to the town above it? I've forgotten the town.
Yeah, I think
Oh, a great use of our water sources, and that's why we have a drought.
I don't believe Comstock's in this area. Yeah,
Comstock.
yeah. Okay.
I just have one question. I know everybody around here has noticed that they're putting in a 42-inch pipeline. And when they finish that pipeline, it's going to have to be hydro tested. And I think it's real important that we know where that water's going to be coming from, that's going to flush those lines from wherever they started to wherever they end. It's going to be thousands and thousands of gallons of water. So that they don't even have it on our groundwater agenda to talk about.
And I'm guessing neither of you know the answer to that. Let's take two more questions and we're gonna have to call it out of time.
Move.
Those of us who are just getting introduced to this and who need unbiased information, from your different backgrounds, do you have any advice of a place to go for information to learn more about this?
They want us without right to water. So they're legislating us out of our rights.
Well, I was asking you guys had this, I mean, like a website or like a place.
Yeah, you're the best stuff on that.
It's a what?
Yeah.
What happens to the water that they've hydro-tested these pipelines with? I know they've come through my property. What happens to the water after they pressure up, get their good test, and they bleed off? Where do they go with this water? They dump it on?
Yeah, don't know. On the
Try to ask.
on the reliable source of information, yeah, particularly on the science side, it's again, I guess I'm fumbling here because it's like I don't know where to send you. Now I do have a blog that I post about groundwater stuff, and from time to time I post about Kinney County, and I'm striving to be even keeled in terms of reviewing work that's been done and talking about some of the work that Corinne's doing. It's called SoSecretOccultAndConcealed.com. Inspired by that Texas. So secret, occult, and so secret, concealed, and occult. Good grief, now I'm forgetting it. So secret, occult, and concealed .blogspot.com. But my recommendation is like what I do is I look at all the sources. So I seek to understand what everybody is saying and
there's an incredible website that's maintained called edwardsaquifer.org. Is it org or .com? .com, I think it is.
Yeah, I think it's .com.
And it's just it's a gentleman who works for the San Antonio water system who's just been compiling all of the information about the Edwards for a few decades now, and it's an incredible resource. That's the one I know for just, and obviously there'll be a whole bunch on other parts of the Edwards that aren't related to Kinney County, but there'll be Kinney County information there too.
Any government website to just help us know as citizens what our rights are, just like a baseline. Is there any government entity that might be good?
Well, if you Google up, Texas groundwater districts management law, you'll come across all kinds of resources from different governmental entities, from the Association of Groundwater Districts, from the Water Development Board. There's a number of governmental entities in particular, but also some private, some of these association of governments that they have very solid, reliable information that can get you oriented to these laws that we've been talking about.
Chapter 36 of the Water Code.
Yeah, Chapter 36 of the Water Code is the statute that governs how we manage groundwater. So if you look up Chapter 36 Texas Water Code, then that'll also lead you to all kinds of resources. It's edwardsaquifer.net. I'm sorry, edwardsaquifer.net.
Final question here, final formal question. You can go ahead.
Hi, so I'm a local citizen here concerned about our groundwater. And one of the things that sometimes is a little bit confusing to me is that our county lies in two different regional management areas, Region 7 and Region 10. I believe our DFC is set, I may be flipping the numbers. Is it in 7, Janelle?
Two separate DFs.
Right, so our DFC is set in one, but a lot of our recharge area is in a different region. So any insight you could give, and sometimes I'm confused about like which regional planning meeting should I be attending and which of those is more critical to us achieving the goals that we have of protecting the spring. Thanks.
So those are set. You can blame me for them. I was at the Water Development Board when we came up with that map, and the footprints of those were based on the footprints of the major aquifers. And so you're in two because there's an Edwards Balcones Folkestone aquifer, and then there's an Edwards Trinity Plateau aquifer. But as I mentioned early, it's Edwards is Edwards is Edwards, and so it doesn't really make sense. But the law is associated with those groundwater management areas. So the subsequent law requiring districts to plan and come up with DFCs is based on the footprints of those areas. And so that's why it is the way it is. Again, there's some discussions. There's been discussions for many years, if not decades, on, is the Edwards in Kinney County part of the San Antonio segment. And so who knows what the future might hold there. Maybe those maps get changed at some point.
So we're going to bring it to a close
Are you willing
now
to
on
take
the.
one more question? I would like to ask a question if possible. Are you willing to take one more question, please?
Since you asked nicely, one more question. And because you control the video.
Okay, thank you. My name is Adam Olson. I'm a resident of Fort Clark, and my question is about what you might have touched on earlier, sublimation, the collapse of the natural recharge waterways into our aquifer. And my question arises, my whole question is, how could we push the groundwater district towards analyzing this situation? It's undeniable that we've gone through a large time of arid climate, and that these conditions could cause sublimation unknown to us. And 2 points of anecdotal evidence is that we have been hearing that artesian wells up north are flowing out of the ground. That's great. We love that for them. But at the same time, I have heard an informed opinion that it may be the case that due to these arid conditions, some of the quicker recharge routes that are more near the top of our geology might have been collapsed, and now we're more relying on these slow trickle charges due to sublimation. But my real question is, how could we push the groundwater committee or groundwater district towards investigating this?
Thank you.
So I mean, it boils down to addressing the groundwater conservation district. So you can send letters. Generally, groundwater districts in their meetings have opportunities for public comments. It might even be required.
It's now required.
It's required. So that's an opportunity to get up and make comments, rally folks to go and make those comments. Ultimately, they can blow you off, right? They can just be like, oh, whatever.
But plainly, sublimation is one of their enumerated responsibilities in the Texas Water Code to guard against that.
Argue. I mean, they could argue out of it as well. Also, talk to your the rep that reps you on the district. That might be the first place to start, is go talk to that person that represents you. And then it's just a matter of like pushing the district. And then if you're not getting satisfaction there, then you try to elect candidates that will take your issues seriously.
It seems like an issue that needs a lot of prior data.
I think, you might be pushing for them to look at the issue and to study it in order to collect the data. Because if you don't have the study, you're going to have to do the study to look and assess if that's something to worry about, if that's an issue. I'm going to shooting from the hip. I'm not sure that's a real big issue, because if there is a collapse, it's pretty chunky. And so you're still going to be able to get a lot of water through those features. In some cases, it might actually increase recharge. Like if there was a collapse feature that's now suddenly open to take recharge, there might actually be an increase. Yeah. But again, that's just me shooting from the hip. But.
So thanks again to LMSCA for putting this together. It's a tremendous effort on their part and a tremendous result, I believe. Thank you so much to Bill Bunch and Dr. Robert Mace for their expertise and their willingness to sacrifice all of a Saturday to come share their wisdom with us. And thanks to everybody that came. This is outstanding that you have this keen interest and willingness to spend the time devoted to this. It's so important to everybody, as you well know. So thank you to all of you.
When's the band playing?
The band is going to start. Next up, I believe, will be Andrew Austin with Lapon Apache.
We're gonna do the drawing first.
And the drawing will happen right now and maybe entertained by Andrew Austin during the drawing or right after the drawing. Thanks.